Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Soul Land 2 Part 144 based on novel. So let's start. All 7 pillars glowed at the same time. The snowflakes that were originally pristine white sparkled along with the ice essence and gradually became dark blue. The auras of those dark blue shadows became stronger every time they transformed. Several minutes later, all 7 pillars crumbled at the same time, and the 7 snowflakes floated into the air as they shrank. They transformed into a bracelet of snowflakes as it wrapped itself around the Snow Empress' left wrist. The Snow Empress slowly turned around. She still had a clean and cold look on her face, but she said plainly, "I'm good." Hui Yuhao stared at her with jaws agape and wide eyes as he said, You've recovered your memory." Hui Yuhao could feel that his connection with the Snow Empress hadn't really changed from before, and their thoughts were still connected. However, there seemed to be something else in the Snow Empress consciousness that was like a kind of will. Yes, after absorbing the manifold mysterious ice essence, the Snow Empress had probably. Yes, the Snow Empress gave a very clear answer. Hui Yuhao's eyes instantly became very complicated, a look that the Sky Dream Ice Worm shared. The Snow Empress was still number 3 amongst the 10 great savage beasts after all. She was inferior only to the beast god, Di Qian, and the Evil Eye Tyrant King. The Snow Empress had recovered her memory. Would she still be willing to remain as Hui Yuhao's spirit? Just as the Ice Empress had said, she could find a new host after fusing with the ice essence. Since that was the case, she could possibly even recreate her physical body. The Snow Empress had become the Snow Lady ever since she merged with Hui Yuhao and remained by his side. She was like his daughter when she was younger and became like his little sister when she gradually grew up. She was someone that Hui Yuhao felt like he had to care for and protect in his heart, so how could he not develop an attachment after so long? Hui Yuhao stared at the Snow Lady, who was standing in front of him. She had unrivaled beauty that matched even Donga, and Hui Yuhao could feel a thread of fear in his heart. He really didn't want the Snow Empress to leave, and deep in his heart, he would rather the Snow Empress had remained as the Snow Lady. As for the Sky Dream Ice Worm, the reason for his complicated emotions was a lot simpler. The Ice Empress liked the Snow Empress. The Snow Empress was his rival in love. The Ice Empress was hot and cold to him from the beginning to the end, but now that the Snow Empress had regained her memory, had his chances not dwindled even more? How could he not be dejected? The Snow Empress seemed to feel the changes in Hui Yuhao's emotions as she said plainly, "I'm the Snow Empress, and I am also the Snow Lady." Hui Yuhao felt a tremble in his heart, and his eyes were overcome with pleasant surprise. The Ice Empress transformed into a beam of green light at this moment and rushed to the Snow Empress. She opened her arms and hugged her tightly. "You're back, Snow. That's great, that's just great. You're finally back." The Snow Empress hugged the Ice Empress as well, and a faint smile finally appeared on her beautiful, ice-cold face. "I'm good, Ice Empress." The Sky Dream Ice Worm flew next to Hui Yuhao with a depressed expression on his face. His eyes were dreary, and Hui Yuhao turned towards him amusedly and said, "Be strong, brother Sky Dream." The Sky Dream Ice Worm heaved a sigh. He didn't say anything as he flew directly towards the manifold mysterious ice essence. He wasn't like the Ice Empress or the Snow Empress, who both absorbed 2 or more at a time. Instead, he targeted a single pillar and began to absorb it. Less than half of the pillars were left inside the cavern after the 2 ladies had finished absorbing theirs. Hui Yuhao did a rough count. There were a total of 45 ice pillars inside the cavern. The Ice Empress had absorbed 9, the Snow Empress had absorbed 13, and in addition to the 7 pillars that she had sealed away with an unknown method, 29 pillars were gone and 16 were left. The Sky Dream Ice Worm was evidently a lot slower at absorbing the ice essence in comparison to the Snow and the Ice Empress. Not too long ago, he had fused almost all his origin power with Hui Yuhao, and his element of ice was used as a medium for Hui Yuhao's second martial soul back then. Therefore, even though he still had some left, those elements were far inferior to the Snow and Ice Empress. If he hadn't absorbed the manifold mysterious ice essence in the past, he probably wouldn't even be worthy of absorbing any now. The 2 ladies hugged for a moment before they gradually separated. The The Snow Empress' eyes were full of lament, while the Ice Empress' eyes were filled with elation. The Snow Empress turned around and nodded at Hui Yuhao. "Thanks for taking care of me over these years." Hui Yuhao shook his head and said, "I didn't do much." The Snow Empress flashed him a faint smile and said, "I have always been very clear about favors and grudges. I will always accompany you for allowing me to live again, and we will always follow you if you manage to break through that level. And even if you fail, I will follow you to the end of your life, and make my own plans after you leave this world." Evidently, Hui Yuhao didn't think the Snow Empress would say such things, as he stared at her with an astonished look on his face. The Snow Empress' icy features melted into a slight smile as she suddenly raised her hands and grabbed Hui Yuhao's collar. "Eh?" Hui Yuhao stared at her in shock. The Snow Empress pulled her hands open to both sides, taking Hui Yuhao's shirt along with them, and revealing his chest. Hui Yuhao was immediately embarrassed as he grabbed the Snow Empress' hands. "What are you doing, Snow Empress?" The Snow Empress' pretty eyes squinted slightly as she stared at Hui Yuhao's chest. She muttered to herself, "Beast god Di Qian." Humph. Hui Yuhao realized then that her attention was focused on the reverse scale on his chest. His embarrassment ebbed as he released the Snow Empress' hands. The Snow Empress' hands were smooth but cold, and they were like tender snow and ice that were without warmth, yet perfect and without blemish. The Snow Empress glanced at him and said, "Don't worry. With our help, once your strength reaches a certain level, you will undoubtedly be able to shake off the burden from Di Qian's reverse scale. But that's not possible now. Even though I have awakened, I will suppress my own strength. Otherwise, Di Qian will make a move against you once he realizes that I am inhabiting your body. When you manage to get your 8th ring, take a trip to the extreme north. There is a place there that is suitable for helping your cultivation breakthrough. Not even Di Qian will have an easy time killing you once you become a titled Doluo." Hui Yuhao tilted his head in acknowledgement. The Snow Empress was just that intimidating. He was the only one that was working hard to break free from the Beast God's shackles when it was just the Ice Empress and the Sky Dream Ice Worm with him. But when the Snow Empress woke up, and her words clearly meant that she wanted to help him break free. This was the difference between their strengths. The Snow Empress closed his shirt as she turned around at the Ice Empress and said, "Ice, my origin has stabilized. With help from the manifold mysterious ice essence, I can regain some of my strength from a long time ago. From now on, we will teach him the art of controlling ice." "All right," the Ice Empress nodded as she agreed. The Snow Empress turned towards Hui Yuhao and said, "Last time, you were too weak, so you couldn't have learned even if we did try to teach you. You have a certain foundation in your spiritual power at this point, and your soul power is sufficient to control relatively more powerful ice-type abilities, so you can start learning now. You have to break through to become a titled Doluo within 2 years. Afterwards, you have to work hard toward that." Hui Yuhao nodded. He suddenly realized that his belief that the Snow Empress would probably leave him after she woke up was entirely wrong. The Snow Empress awakening made him feel a lot less pressure instead, and oftentimes, it was usually the most relaxed for him when he didn't have to consider his own future. With the Snow Empress and the Ice Empress giving him pointers, if his ability to control ice could continue to improve, his overall strength would undoubtedly increase. Hui Yuhao had twin martial souls, but his main martial soul had been his spirit eyes from the beginning to the end. Even though he had invented his 3 ultimate Haodong skills, those skills had their foundations in spiritual power, and his ice-type abilities were all purely channeled through soul skills. His control over ice was achieved mainly through spiritual power to control the elements of ice. The method that the Snow Empress was speaking of clearly wasn't so simple. The Sky Dream Ice Worm was relatively slower at absorbing the manifold mysterious ice essence. He managed to absorb 1 after a long while, and there were 15 pillars left. The Snow Empress said, "You should absorb some too, Star Anise." The Star Anise mysterious ice grass swayed on Hui Yuhao's shoulder and glided over. It flew next to the Sky Dream Ice Worm and landed stably on the ground. It shook his head from side to side as it released circles of blue hues that encased a pillar. Light rippled as the pillar shone. The Star Anise was starting to absorb it. The Star Anise's element was also ice. Furthermore, it had been living next to the ice-fire yin-yang well's extreme chill ice spring over its entire life, and its attributes were not weak at all. Even though the star anise didn't have a very strong cultivation, it was still absorbing the ice essence more quickly than the Sky Dream ice worm. The Ice Empress stood next to the Snow Empress. She was clearly subsidiary. Hui Yuhao had a strange feeling in his heart. The Snow Empress awakening immediately made her the leader of his four spirits, and she seemed like a big sister taking care of everyone else. How unfortunate for Brother Sky Dream. I wonder if he can still be together with the Ice Empress. I hope he can. The Snow Empress said, while they are absorbing the ice essence, let me take you on a walk through the world of ice. She raised her right hand as she spoke and gently placed it on Hui Yuhao's forehead. Hui Yuhao immediately felt an extreme chill pierce into his brain, and his consciousness seemed to travel to another world in the next moment. That world was white, everything was white, but it was also very quiet, and there wasn't a single sound at all. A single droplet suddenly appeared soundlessly. It hovered in mid-air and emanated gentle water-based ripples. Water is the foundation of snow and ice. Water is the source of all things, and of all life. The power of water is that it can flow into anything. The droplet immediately increased in size as she spoke. When it had become so large that even Hui Yuhao's consciousness had to look up, it suddenly exploded and transformed into countless water droplets that splattered in all directions. There were large and small ones, and all Hui Yuhao felt was moisture as they flew through the air. Yes, water could flow into everything. Only with water would there be life and nature. Yes, water was the source of all life. A droplet paused in front of Hui Yuhao. He tried to control himself with his thoughts, and he realized to his surprise that he actually had a body, and he was raising his hand to gently touch this droplet. The water droplet stopped on the tip of his finger, and the moist feeling soaked into his finger. Perhaps it was because this world was too spacious and quiet, but Hui Yuhao felt very real when his finger touched the water droplet. Water, when there was life. Suddenly, the droplets around him changed, and the temperature in the air plummeted. The droplets gradually became ice. Ice and snow all come from water, no matter what state they are in. Water becomes ice due to low temperatures. Ice is water in solid form, it's water that is hard, and water that is tough. Tiny ice grains splattered on Hui Yuhao's body. He could feel waves of piercing pain course over his body, and he tried to block them subconsciously, but realized that he could no longer control his body. He could only let those ice crystals assault him. It's so painful. Ice is the toughness of water? Large masses of ice crystals stuck to his body as they billowed toward him. However, Hui Yuhao could only feel cool and refreshed instead of cold. The art of controlling ice lies in controlling temperature. Once you have grasped the secret of temperature and the characteristics of water, you will have made some headway into the art of controlling ice. Today, I will let you feel the first level of controlling ice, temperature changes. The ice spheres that were pressed against Hui Yuhao's body suddenly changed, and they all melted. The cool and refreshing feeling instantaneously became one of coldness and chill that pierced his bones, and Hui Yuhao couldn't help but shiver from the cold. Water solidifying into ice will release large amounts of heat, while ice melting into water requires large amounts of heat. Therefore, you won't feel cold so quickly when ice is pressed against you, but the ice will suck the heat from your body when it melts, and then the cold will come. The Snow Empress words resonated in Hui Yuhao's mind. He suddenly realized that he had never really understood ice. In spite of his possession of ultimate ice, he had overlooked many things about the very origins of ice. Coldness wasn't just about controlling temperature, more importantly, it represented an understanding of ice itself. The whiteness around him dissipated amidst the silence, and Hui Yuhao returned to the manifold mysterious ice cavern. However, he had entered a state of epiphany in this moment. The Snow Empress didn't teach him much, but she spoke of foundations and roots. The Ice Empress looked at the Snow Empress with a faint smile on her face. I never expected you to become a teacher one day. The Snow Empress smiled faintly and said, have I not been a teacher to you before? The Ice Empress took a few steps forward and grabbed one of the Snow Empress' hands. She leaned gently against her and said, Snow, I have missed you so much. It's great that you're back. The Snow Empress raised her hand and stroked the Ice Empress' face gently. You silly girl, you are lucky and happy whether or not I am here. At least, you are much more blessed than I am. The Ice Empress was momentarily stunned as she stood up straight. Why do you say that? The Snow Empress glanced at the Sky Dream Ice Worm, who was still absorbing the ice essence effortfully, and said, because you have him. The Ice Empress' expression changed as she lowered her head and said, you mind his presence? The Snow Empress' eyes changed slightly, and her expression suddenly became cold as she said plainly, yes, I do mind his presence. Go kill him for me. Ah? The Ice Empress exclaimed in shock. She released the Snow Empress' hand as she stumbled backward, and she stared at the Snow Empress with a look of disbelief. Why? Why do you want to kill him? He will not be a threat to you. It's true, you're the one I like. The Snow Empress answered plainly, since I'm the one you like, and he keeps sticking with you, then what use is there to keep him around? Are you still the Ice Empress that was full of a desire to kill back then? Kill him. The Ice Empress was momentarily stunned. Her frame was trembling a little, and she snapped her head around and stared at the Sky Dream Ice Worm, who was still working hard at absorbing the ice essence. Her eyes sparkled incessantly. She knew that the Sky Dream Ice Worm could definitely hear what the Snow Empress was saying even though he was absorbing the ice essence. However, he didn't have any reaction at all. Does he not know how to speak for his own life? Why is not talking? The Snow Empress said plainly, he's useless. He's an ice worm, and he's only managed to accumulate some strength by relying on his long life because he absorbed the manifold mysterious ice essence. However, his strength was absorbed by the beast god and the great star doe forest savage beasts. He fused with Hu Hao afterwards, and not too long ago, he fused all of his spiritual origin with him. Right now, he is completely useless. Killing him will not affect us, and neither will it affect you how. We can be together without him coming between us. What are you waiting for, Ice? Do it. The Ice Empress shivered vigorously as watery mist appeared in her beautiful eyes. The Ice Empress was very conflicted as she stood there. The Sky Dream Ice Worm, who was deeply in love with her, was standing behind her, while the Snow Empress, who she had always been in love with, was standing in front of her. Do I really have to choose between them? The Ice Empress was a soul beast, but she had long possessed intelligence that wasn't inferior to that of humans. The rise of intelligence would undoubtedly enrich feelings and emotions. How could she not feel how good the Sky Dream Ice Worm was to her? That was especially so when danger was knocking on her doorstep over several episodes, and the Sky Dream Ice Worm had defended her with his life every single time. How could she not feel anything for him, when he would give everything for her? She had been spending every single day with the Sky Dream Ice Worm ever since she went into Hu Hao. Top-tier soul beasts also had feelings, and at this moment, the Snow Empress was asking her to kill him. How could she not be conflicted? Snow, have you not said before that he's been very good to me, and that I should? The Ice Empress spoke with a trembling voice. The Snow Empress said plainly, that was before. I couldn't give you a sense of security back then, and I couldn't be with you. I was willing to have someone around to protect you. But it's different now, and I have returned. There is nobody else in this world better suited to protect you than me. His existence will only be a distraction for us when we are together. I don't wish to see that. Why aren't you making a move? Snow. The Ice Empress said agonizingly. The Snow Empress said coldly, that means you can't bear to move against him. That's fine. If you don't want to, then I'll do it. The Snow Empress floated forward as she spoke, and arrived in front of the Ice Empress in an instant. The Ice Empress hadn't even reacted when the Snow Empress' left hand pressed gently on her shoulder. Snowflakes condensed one after another, and swiftly wrapped around the Ice Empress' body. The snowflakes fixed her to the spot and immobilized her. Even though they were all energy forms that originated from their consciousnesses, the Snow Empress' strength was superior to the Ice Empress. Furthermore, the Ice Empress was caught off guard. The Ice Empress was fixed in place by the Snow Empress, and her body was swiftly half-turned. She watched in shock as the Snow Empress brushed past her, and her palm that was clear and dark blue pressed against the back of the Sky Dream Ice Worm's heart. No, the Ice Empress screamed. Her voice was filled with fear and agony as intense green light erupted from her body while she struggled to free herself from the Snow Empress shackles. The Ice Empress was far too familiar with the Snow Empress palm, Snowless Glacier, the Snow Empress' strongest attack. Even she probably wouldn't survive if this attack was used against her, let alone the Skydream Ice Worm. The Ice Empress felt as if her heart had just skipped a beat, and an unspeakable fear filled her heart. He's dead, Snow has killed him. Snow has killed him. The Ice Empress' eyes gradually turned red as she screamed hysterically. The ice auras that were coming from her body climbed rapidly as green light erupted, and the Snow Empress snowflakes that were holding her down were melting at an incredible speed. The Skydream Ice Worm stood there motionless. There was a dark blue layer over his body. The Ice Empress was only far too familiar with that dark blue color that was filled with the stench of death. Snowless Glacier took away all life, and even an individual as powerful as the Beast God would probably be severely injured if the Snow Empress had struck him when she was at her full strength. There was only one method to fight against Snowless Glacier, and that was to not let the Snow Empress come close. But how easy was it not to let the Snow Empress come close? The Skydream Ice Worm was also defenseless, and he was struck just like that. His vitality seemed to vanish in but an instant. Snowless Glacier was something that could freeze even spirits. Bam! Snowflakes scattered in all directions. The Ice Empress finally broke through her shackles as she pounced hysterically towards the Skydream Ice Worm. The Snow Empress blocked her with a flash. Countless snowflakes billowed in all directions as they became a barrier that barricaded the Ice Empress. The Ice Empress screamed as she pressed her hands forward. The Ice Jade Empress Scorpion's shadow glimmered behind her as intense green light transformed into an enormous pillar that went straight for the Snow Empress. "You dare to attack me, Ice?" The Snow Empress shouted angrily. "Why? Why did you have to kill him? He would never be a threat to you. Why did you kill him? Why?" The Ice Empress cried and howled sorrowfully. Her hands blasted with the light of ultimate ice, which hammered continuously against the Snow Empress. She seemed to have gone insane in this moment, and her emotions were a little out of control. The Snow Empress used but one hand as she defended herself against the Ice Empress' crazy assault. However, she didn't answer her question. Why? He was never a threat to anyone, and he had only lived a little longer than everyone else. But everyone wants to target him, to harm him. What wrong has he ever committed? Why, Snow, why did you have to hurt him? Tears dripped from the Ice Empress' eyes like waterfalls, and they swiftly transformed into ice crystals. Those ice crystals even contained her soul power as they were tinged with green colors. "You're in love with him, Ice?" The Snow Empress pushed out with her hand and pushed the Ice Empress back. The Ice Empress was momentarily stunned as she stopped attacking, and she just allowed her body to be pushed a few meters out. There was a dazed look on her face, while her gaze was filled with sadness amidst the confusion. "Yes. Perhaps I've really fallen for him. Snow, you're wrong. You shouldn't have killed him. By killing him, I'll never be together with you anymore. Perhaps I've not fallen in love with him, but I'll never be able to get together with you because he died under your hands. Otherwise, how can I live up to the feelings he has for me? Although he wasn't strong, and was even my enemy in the past, he's been really very good to me. I've always felt a sense of hope with him around. However, you've destroyed my hope. Snow, why did you have to do that? Why do you have to make me stand on different ground from you? He's dead, which means that my heart will never belong to you anymore. Do you know? You were wrong. You were wrong to kill him. By killing him, you've destroyed the relationship between us." The Snow Empress sighed and said, "Are you really not in love with him? Because of him, you're even willing to give up on our hundreds of thousands of years together. I wasn't wrong. I was right. Perhaps even you don't know that you've fallen in love with him. It's just that you aren't willing to admit it. You're wrong. You're wrong." The Ice Empress was shouting maniacally. The Snow Empress smiled. Her smile was very beautiful. She was normally very indifferent and cold, and often appeared very unapproachable. However, she was extremely captivating when she smiled. Her smile even gave off a sense of warmth. "I'm not wrong, Ice. Silly girl, I'm only helping you see yourself more clearly." As she spoke, the Snow Empress stood to one side. Behind her, the deep blue from the Skydream Iceworm slowly faded away, and he also slowly turned around, revealing a teary face. "Ice, Ice, Ice, Ice," the Skydream Iceworm's voice was trembling. He couldn't even call her name properly, and his body was shuddering non-stop. His eyes were already filled with emotional undulations. The Ice Empress was stunned as she saw the tears on his face. "He's not dead. He's actually not dead. He's alive. He's still alive." "Ah!" The Ice Empress screamed and instantly turned into a flowing streak of jade-green light. She crashed straight into the Skydream Iceworm's arms and hugged him tightly. However, she was sobbing furiously. The two of them hugged each other as they cried. The feelings that they had always been hiding for each other were finally revealed. The Snow Empress was drifting not far from them. There was a warm smile on her face as she muttered to herself, "I told you I was right." "Thank you, Snow Empress." Hui Yuhao's voice sounded. He had already awoken from his meditation. He saw everything that had happened. In fact, he already knew what the Snow Empress was intending to do when she hit the Skydream Iceworm earlier. As the Snow Empress was closely connected to him and was even his spirit, he knew that she didn't unleash her snowless glacier. How would it be so destructive if that was the case? The Snow Empress drifted beside Hui Yuhao and said, "I've already regained my memory. If I didn't do this, Ice would still be conflicted. She wouldn't be able to know her true feelings." Hui Yuhao looked at the Snow Empress and softly said, "Have you ever liked the Ice Empress? You too noble." The Snow Empress revealed a subtle bitter smile on her face, and her thoughts rang out in Hui Yuhao's mind, "I'm not noble. I've always only had sisterly love for Ice." This? Hui Yuhao suddenly understood, and his expression turned slightly weird as he looked at the Snow Empress. However, there was more of a warm smile on his face. Seeing that the Skydream Iceworm had finally won the heart of the woman he loved, he was delighted. This was perfect. The Skydream Iceworm was the first to stop crying, but he was still hugging the Ice Empress tightly. The Ice Empress' cries slowly stopped too, but she was unwilling to lift her head. She buried her head in the Skydream Iceworm's embrace. The Skydream Iceworm lifted his head to look at Hui Yuhao. Seeing that he was amused, he immediately turned red, and nodded gratefully at the Snow Empress. The Snow Empress smiled and didn't say anything. "Ice, everything's fine. Everything's fine. I'll protect you in the future. Did you know? Today is the happiest day of my life. It's true. I'm really happy. I'm the most blissful iceworm in the world. I must be." The Ice Empress snorted lightly and smacked his shoulder. Suddenly, she forced herself from his embrace and turned into a streak of jade-green light before disappearing into Hui Yuhao's body. She was truly embarrassed right now. The Skydream Iceworm chortled as he watched the Ice Empress disappear. He rubbed the tears off his face, and there was only a coquettish look left. "Continue absorbing." As he spoke, he posed coquettishly. He placed one hand on his waist and grabbed the second manifold mysterious ice essence with his other hand, continuing his earlier absorption. Time passed very quickly. After the star anise mysterious ice grass completely absorbed its sixth pillar of manifold mysterious ice essence, the Skydream Iceworm also completed the absorption of his third pillar. Although it was only his third one, it was still sufficient to strengthen the foundations of his spiritual origins. It was just that most parts of his body were spiritual type, which was why he was unable to seal some ice essence for Hui Yuhao. The star anise mysterious ice grass was much stronger in this aspect. It had absorbed 4 for itself, and sealed another 2 for Hui Yuhao. It was only inferior to the Ice Empress. At this moment, there were only 6 pillars of ice essence left. The temperature in this cavern had also started to rise. "Yuhao, do you sense it? Although there's much less ice essence here, the temperature isn't rising quickly. Why is this?" The Snow Empress asked Hui Yuhao after allowing both the Sky Dream Ice Worm and the mysterious ice grass to return to Hui Yuhao's body. Hui Yuhao replied, "It's because the temperature here is too low. A lot of thermal energy is needed to make the temperature rise. However, there is very little thermal energy in this cold spring. Even if we take all the ice essence away, the temperature here will still take some time before it starts to rise." The Snow Empress nodded and said, "That's right. All right, you can absorb the last 6 pillars. You should be able to bear this amount of ice essence, given the strength of your body. I'll help you. Don't worry. Go and stand in the center." "All right." Hui Yuhao agreed and went to the center of the ice cavern. He increasingly felt that it was a good thing that the Snow Empress had regained her memory. Not only was she a strong partner, she was also like a teacher to him as she kept on helping him. The Snow Empress drifted in place, and her white dress danced in the air. She was like a fairy. As she waved her hand, a sleeve shot up, and the last 6 pillars of ice essence suddenly drifted into the air. They surrounded Hui Yuhao in 6 different directions and were separated from one another at exact distances and angles. These 6 pillars were like 6 ice sticks of life energy. They exuded dim light, and a gentle white glow emanated from the Snow Empress body. This white glow shone on the ice essences. Suddenly, all the ice essences lit up, and shone with a bright blue glow. The ultimate ice origin energy in the air started to become more and more concentrated. Hui Yuhao immediately sensed greater viscosity in the surrounding air. The extremely pure ice essence was even purer than his fluid soul power. Gentle soul power started to seep into his body in streaks. Hui Yuhao didn't need to intentionally circulate his soul power before his soul power started to circulate in the trajectory of his mysterious heaven technique. The Ice Empress tattoo on his back became clearer, and his entire body was glowing jade blue. Very soon, Hui Yuhao felt that his soul power was completely nourished. Following this, he felt that his entire body was ballooning up. It was also at this time that the fusion of manifold mysterious ice essence in his body began to slow down. With every round of circulation, Hui Yuhao's soul power would fuse more and more with the ice essence. He could sense that he wasn't fully absorbing the ice essence. However, it was being turned into spots before being stored within his soul power. If Hui Yuhao's original soul power was fluid, these ice essences that he had just fused into his body but was unable to absorb had turned into thin ice flows that remained within his fluid soul power. Under such a condition, he was able to store more and more ultimate ice origin energy. Hui Yuhao's body was becoming stronger and stronger under the nourishment of his life gold. His passageways were becoming more and more springy. Even if he wasn't able to absorb the ice essences, he could still store them. As his soul power circulated, his ballooning body slowly began to feel more and more comfortable. As his body gradually fused with the ice essences, the speed at which the ice essences surged into his body increased. This process carried on for close to 2 hours before Hui Yuhao managed to fuse all of the 6 ice essences into his body. Even though he could only temporarily absorb part of them, he could still sense the improvements to his soul power throughout this process. Given enough time, he believed that his soul power could make significant improvements. We're done. These ice essences have been compressed within your body. When you cultivate in the future, they'll slowly fuse further into your body and strengthen your cultivation. The Snow Empress woke Hui Yuhao from his cultivation state. As he opened his eyes, Hui Yuhao suddenly saw small white cyclones around his body. They exuded an icy cold aura. As he breathed, he discovered that these cyclones were coming out of his nose. It was really magical. This place, it's a pity. The Snow Empress looked around her and sighed. Hui Yuhao was curious as he asked, "What's wrong?" This video will end here.